Mattis, Tillerson detailed Trump's North Korea strategy. President Donald Trump's top national security advisers detailed the administration's strategy for dealing with North Korea in back-to-back classified briefings on Capitol Hill Wednesday, which lawmakers described as a sober assessment of the diplomatic and military approach to the North Korean threat. There was bipartisan consensus that Trump's national security team outlined a sensible strategy for dealing with the problem that has no good solution and has now stymied the United States for decades, but Democrats said their assessment, in both tone and strategy, was at odds with the commander-in-chief. "There's no bluster in there," New York Representative Eliot Engel, the top Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, told reporters after leaving the briefing. "There's bluster. We hear from the president from time to time about cutting off trade with countries like China or cutting off the trade agreement with countries like South Korea. That doesn't make much sense to me." Democrats have taken issue with Trump's tweets, including his suggestion that the U.S. might cut off trade with China and pull out of the South Korean trade agreement, as well as his fire and fury rhetoric that seemed to favor military action. Senator Chris Murphy, a Connecticut Democrat, said the briefing that touted a diplomacy-first strategy was directly contradictory to everything the president says. "I feel like we still have two different polices on North Korea, one at the Department of State and Department of Defense, and another on the president's Twitter feed," Murphy said. Defense Secretary James Mattis, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Joe Dunford and Director of National Intelligence Stan Coates briefed the full House and Senate on Wednesday on both North Korea and Afghanistan. Last month, Mattis rejected the notion there was daylight between himself and Trump on North Korea, following a round of news reports after Trump tweeted that talking is not the answer and Mattis said there's always a diplomatic solution. Wednesday's briefings come as the U.S. is preparing to respond to North Korea's latest nuclear test with a new United Nations Security Council resolution. Lawmakers said there was talk of new sanctions and other efforts to put economic and diplomatic pressure on North Korea, and how to convince China to help in isolating Pyongyang. Senator Cory Gardner said he backed efforts to ramp up sanctions targeting those who aid North Korea, including cutting off North Korean exports to China, its shipping and its petroleum imports. "China has made some steps, and I commend them for those steps. Obviously they could have blocked the last resolution at the UN and they did not, but we need to see more action from China," said Gardner, a Colorado Republican. "They control so much of the North Korean economy, they can do far more and far greater good." House Armed Services Committee Chairman Mac Thornberry said the briefing underscored the need to fully fund the military budget and additional missile defense spending. "They're pushing diplomacy, obviously they're making a big effort in the UN, and there are of course military options. My thought is that we in Congress could support all of those efforts by getting our work done and doing a full-year budget for the military, including enhanced missile defense munitions," said the Texas Republican. Some Republicans disputed the accusations that Trump was contradicting his national security team. "It could be a case to an extent of good cop, bad cop, of unpredictability in the presidency of, hey, I very well may use a military option, that is essential to back up a diplomatic instrument of power," said Illinois Republican Representative Adam Kinzinger. Representative Adam Smith, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, said he felt Mattis and Tillerson had effectively the same message as Trump when it came to North Korea. They reaffirmed that the administration is considering withdrawing from the South Korean trade agreement, for instance, he said. "Obviously, Secretary Tillerson and the others are more diplomatic in the way they put things, but the message wasn't dramatically different," the Washington Democrat said.
It was supposed to be an easy week for Xi Jinping, a chance for the Chinese leader to play strong global statesman while hosting the BRICS summit in Xiamen. Instead, as has become the norm recently, the event was overshadowed by North Korea. North Korea pushed the button on its 6th nuclear test just as the summit was beginning, a provocative move that is exactly what China didn't want to happen. And yet Kim Jong-un went ahead and did it anyway, a clear sign that he's willing to flout China's wishes. Although Beijing is Pyongyang's only major ally and economic lifeline, Kim Jong-un has shown that, at least so far, nothing will deter him from pushing his nuclear program forward. China has publicly condemned North Korea's behavior, including at the UN.
Stop taking actions that are wrong, deteriorating the situation, and not in line with its own interests either.
China also filed a protest with the North Korean embassy in Beijing that appears to be falling on deaf ears. The nuclear test is the third time a North Korean provocation has outshined Xi Jinping at a major international event. Missile tests disrupted the One Belt, One Road Forum, Xi's major economic initiative, as well as the G20, held last September in Hangzhou. Closing out the BRICS summit, Xi chose not to address North Korea despite it being the top issue of the day. Part of the reason Xi doesn't want to talk about it, he's in the midst of preparing for the 19th Party Congress, the most important political event in 5 years, where the president is trying to consolidate his power through 2022. As a result, the nuclear test has all but been erased from state media. The entirety of the first 3 pages of the People's Daily was nothing but the BRICS summit. CCTV barely breathed a word about Kim Jong-un, and on social media platform Weibo, the term hydrogen bomb has been blocked by censors. Still, sweeping the issue under the rug domestically doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and China will now have to ponder its next move, caught between his Asian neighbors and the U.S. and Russia.
For more than 20 years,
the U.S. is pushing for more sanctions at the UN Security Council, further steps China seems to be unwilling to take. It fears a unified Korean peninsula allied with the West and a potential refugee crisis if the regime collapses. But as Kim Jong-un continues to overshadow Xi Jinping when he least wants it, experts are now asking a new question. At what point, if ever, will Beijing decide that propping up North Korea just isn't worth it? Matt Rivers, CNN, Beijing.